Guys, could the 4060 be as good as the 1060?
No.
But Nvidia said it's gonna be amazing.
No.
As many of you guys know, the RTX 4060 is going to be launching on June 29th. They did actually push this release date up, and it's going to be pricing at $300. From Nvidia and how things have been going with this generation, this card looks pretty good on the surface, but there's so much more to this. 3060 costed $330, so $30 more, yet the 4060 is going to be performing 20% faster than it. So overall, you should be getting, at least at MSRP, better price to performance than the last generation. And you don't have to just run on these numbers that Nvidia has provided. Some leaked benchmarks have also come out from 3D Mark, and they seem to pretty much confirm what Nvidia was saying, around about 20-ish% faster. In some cases it's more, some cases it's less. However, the 4060 isn't necessarily better than the 3060. The 3060 original had 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Even at 1080p, 8 gigabytes is really starting to show its limits. That is why with the 4060, they targeted it in their marketing for 1080p instead of 1440p. This does put the 4060 in a little bit of trouble, especially when you go to see what they are going for right now. 3060 12 gigabyte cards are going for $280, which, as you know, is $20 less than the 4060. Because as Daniel Owen showed in this video here, the 4060 Ti, so a tier above the 4060, only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM as well. Compared to the 3060 with 12 gigabytes, because of that VRAM, sometimes the 4060 Ti even loses to the 3060. And again, the 3060 is now going for $280 brand new compared to the 4060 Ti costing $400. So the 4060 again is going to be in a position where it could be limited by its VRAM capacity in the future, which is definitely a downside. Like, obviously VRAM isn't the end all be all. The 4060 is going to be faster than it when it isn't constrained by its VRAM. Then on top of that, you do get AV1 encoding and you do get frame generation. You find those things useful. So there's still some sort of a deal to talk about there. But I did run some quick numbers to see how this card is going to be positioned in the market when it drops. Obviously, we will see very soon. But according to Hardware Unboxed here, if you take that 20% increase at 1080p, then it would get about 95 FPS and slot in just above an RX 7600. And at 1440p, we can see it should be slotting in just above a 7600. Now, I gave it a little bit of a difference here with this. It could be 64 to 67 FPS. So if you guys remember how the 4060 Ti launch went, at 1080p, 3060 Ti and the 4060 Ti were about 9% apart from each other. But if you went to 1440p, they were only 5% apart from each other. That is because the 3060 Ti had a 256-bit bus compared to what the 4060 Ti on its 128-bit bus. Because if you scale up in resolution, your GPU is more memory hungry, and if the VRAM isn't fast enough to keep up with it, then you're gonna get worse performance. That's why we saw a difference in performance uplift going from 1080p to 1440p. Now, the 4060 Ti was especially embarrassing, but that is also the same reason why this could also happen for the 4060 compared to the 3060, which is why if you're gaming at anything maybe other than 1080p, the performance gap is going to change significantly. That's why Nvidia is only recommending these 4060s to game at 1080p at excellent levels of fidelity, apparently. But we also need to talk about the confusing marketing conditions that this 4060 Ti is launching into, because as I mentioned earlier, the 3060 8GB model, this 8GB card came about in October of last year, and it was a very quiet launch from Nvidia. And that's because this version of the 3060 is trying to pull some really shady marketing tactics on people, because it isn't just 8GB of VRAM. It's like, oh, I don't need 12, I can just get 8. The 3060 8GB card performs significantly worse than the 12GB version of it. It's a lot like how they had to unlaunch the 4080 12GB because of how much worse it performed compared to the 16GB version. Now, obviously this 12GB 4080 model is now just the 4070 Ti, but Nvidia got away with releasing the 8GB version of the 3060. So this 3060 8GB model just makes this whole situation confusing for consumers. I think what the 4060 is going to do is possibly push stock of the older 3060 cards. Maybe you're looking on PC Part Picker and you're like, maybe I won't get the 4060 but I'll get the 3060 instead because I saw that the performance increase was only like 20%. And you look on PC Part Picker, and you're like, oh, I'll just get the 8GB version of the 3060 because that's the same amount of VRAM as the 4060, so it wouldn't be a problem, right? Why do you have to figure out an 8GB model of this? Why does this card really exist? And that's just really to try to make the 4060 with the same amount of VRAM look better. That is because given current prices at the 3060 12GB model at $280 compared to the 4060 that is going to be launching at $300, the 4060 is 7% more expensive, but it is 20% faster. So they made this 3060 8GB card look very similar to the 4060. And then they priced it. Right now, currently, it is at $260, brand new. That makes the 4060 15% more expensive, but the 4060 performs 40% faster, at least theoretically, according to what I could figure out. Like that 8GB card was significantly cut down. And this just kind of goes to show that even when a card looks like it is a good deal from Nvidia, they're still kind of pulling some shady marketing. It doesn't come without any strings attached nowadays. So I bet you're wondering, at $300, is the 4060 going to be a decent deal though, despite the shady marketing? Because as I showed you earlier in this video, the 4060 is most likely going to be a little bit faster than the RX 7600, but at $300 on the 4060, you can see that 7600s are already starting to drop to $250. And this is a flat price, no coupons, no promo deals or anything like that. So if you do want about the performance of a 4060 in gaming, mostly in rasterized games, then you could technically get it for $250 and you still have that advantage of getting AV1 encoding. The problem is when you start to talk about ray tracing as well, and I don't know how good either of these cards are going to be in the grand scheme of things, but the 4060 is going to be faster at ray tracing. And I think at this performance tier at 1080p, ray tracing might be a viable option. But let's not forget about last generation. And if you're very much concerned about just gaming performance, as you know, the 4060 is going to be launching at $300. If you just pay $10 more, you can get last generation 6700 XT, which has 12GB VRAM, solves the VRAM problem that the 4060 is going to have. And yeah, it will be a little bit worse at ray tracing and you don't get AV1 or frame generation. But this is looking like a good deal in comparison. So the 4060 doesn't seem bad at its price of $300, but it doesn't really seem that good either. And I hate to see all the shady marketing that's going on with the 3060 from last generation that this card is supposedly replacing. And what's bad about that is this doesn't seem like an exciting generational card. Maybe it's the best we've seen from 4000 series in Nvidia so far, and that's because it's probably a 4050 repackaged as a 4060, because 4050 that would realistically be priced a lot less, and being 20% faster than last generation's 60 class card would genuinely be a pretty good deal. And I hate when Nvidia goes to their marketing, and if you scroll down here, they show the performance first for the 4060 and 4060 Ti, and then the next marketing point that they show is power consumption. And that's because this card realistically should be a 4050. Especially when you look at this older article from Video Cards, this 4060 is probably only going to be drawing 115 watts, which is like nothing. It kind of just goes to show even more how this naming structure is really messed up, and then that makes these cards cost $300, because I think the 4060 will be an okay card at $300, but nothing that's going to entice people or get people excited for the future. And I can't imagine how much worse this would have been if they didn't unlaunch the 4080 12GB, because that could have changed the entire product stack naming for this generation. Because if the 4080 12GB existed, would the 4070 been a 4070 Ti? And would the 4060 Ti would that have been a 4070? Imagine how much worse this would have been if this is the thing that happened. I really think all the 4060 is going to do for Nvidia, which is kind of hilarious, but it's going to make the 4060 Ti look even worse. So if we compare the 4060 at $300 compared to the $400 4060 Ti, it's going to be 17% faster at 1080p and about 33% more expensive. And it only has 8GB of VRAM as well. And at 1440p, it seems like the 4060 Ti will be about 20% faster and cost 33% more. This 4060 Ti is going to look even worse, and that launch that absolutely bombed for that graphics card is gonna be aging like fine milk. And that also goes to show when they launched the 4060 Ti 16GB, which is basically the same card. Looking into the future here for Nvidia, that card is gonna get even more clowned on at $500 at the same bus width as the 8GB version. That's pretty bad. The 4060 is definitely not going to be a new 1060, okay? Like, I think that's clear to everybody. It is not giving the same amazing price to performance that the 1060 gave over its last generation 900 series. I'm assuming that the 4060 is going to launch and it's going to be kind of meh. It has some advantages, like it's going to be okay at ray tracing at $300, and it's going to have 81 encoding and frame generation. So if those are up your alley, it's not that bad, but it isn't going to push people to buy the 40 series generation of cards. I guess we'll see when reviews come out on the 28th. See you guys in the comments. See you in the next video. Y'all have a good one. Peace.